The fourth and final reason that so many people remain financially stagnant or simply broke lies in their failure to structure their life and finances around principles rather than short-term outcomes. Most people think that wealth comes from luck, a high-paying job, or a single big break. While opportunities matter, they are not the foundation. The foundation is understanding how the economic world works, how human nature works, and then deliberately designing your financial life to work within those realities. Without principles, your financial decisions will always be reactive, inconsistent, and ultimately self-defeating. Let's start with the concept of leverage, not just financial leverage, but leverage in learning, in relationships, and in decision-making. Financial leverage is often misunderstood. People think borrowing money to invest is inherently risky. But leverage is simply a force multiplier. It amplifies both gains and losses. The key is understanding the range of possible outcomes and managing your risk so that you can benefit from leverage without exposing yourself to catastrophic loss. Similarly, leverage in knowledge is about using the wisdom of mentors, the lessons of history, and tested systems rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. Every billionaire, every successful investor I've studied, has learned to multiply their capabilities by using leverage intelligently. If you try to do everything on your own without learning from others' experience, you will fall behind. Another critical principle is radical transparency with yourself about your financial habits. Most people are blind to their own patterns. They spend impulsively, they ignore recurring expenses, and they rationalize poor decisions. They make excuses, I deserve this, or I'll start saving next month. But the harsh truth is that wealth accumulation is not about occasional brilliance, it is about consistent, disciplined execution over years. To fix this, you must track your money ruthlessly. Every dollar that leaves your hands should have a purpose, and every investment you make should be measured against a framework of expected risk and reward. Write it down, review it frequently, and hold yourself accountable, as if you were running a business, because you are. A third area that keeps people broke is ignoring cycles. Everything in life, including your finances, moves in cycles. Markets go up and down, industries rise and fall, and personal fortunes fluctuate. Yet most people act as if success or failure is linear. They spend heavily when times are good and panic when times are bad. They borrow recklessly during booms and sell at the bottom during recessions. The truly wealthy recognize these cycles and design their behavior to align with them. This might mean saving aggressively during boom periods, learning new skills when your industry is shrinking, or creating multiple streams of income to buffer against inevitable downturns. Failure to understand cycles is one of the most common ways people sabotage their financial future. Let's talk about the importance of building multiple streams of income. Too many people are trapped in the mindset of one job, one paycheck. This is extremely dangerous. The world changes faster than ever. Technology, regulation, and markets evolve constantly. Relying solely on a single income source is like putting all your eggs in one basket during a hurricane. The wealthy understand that diversification isn't just about stocks or bonds, it's about creating parallel sources of cash flow, investments, business ventures, royalties, side projects, or even strategic partnerships. This also means developing skills that are portable, in demand, and scalable. The more streams of income you can generate intelligently, the less vulnerable you are to any single failure, and the more optionality you create for yourself. A fifth point is the mastery of time and patience. Wealth doesn't appear overnight, no matter what social media claims. People are broke because they seek instant gratification, measure success in short-term gains, and fail to let compounding work in their favor. Compounding, whether in investments, knowledge, or skill development, is slow, almost invisible at first, but immensely powerful over time. The irony is that the same forces that make compounding effective also make destructive behaviors dangerous. Small, repeated mistakes compound negatively. Eating out too often, over-leveraging credit cards, skipping investments, or neglecting personal development, these accumulate silently. Success requires the discipline to endure years of steady, incremental improvement without the immediate validation that most people crave. Equally important is the emotional mastery of money. Humans are not rational creatures by default. Fear, greed, pride, and envy drive most financial decisions. People buy high because they are afraid of missing out, or sell low because they panic. They overvalue short-term reward and undervalue long-term stability. To overcome this, you must first understand your own emotional tendencies. Then, create rules and systems that prevent these tendencies from sabotaging your wealth. For example, set strict limits on speculative investments, automate your savings, and periodically review your portfolio dispassionately. By decoupling emotions from execution, you allow rational principles to guide your financial life rather than impulsive reactions. Finally, let's consider the value of reflection and continuous learning. Wealthy individuals do not assume that what worked yesterday will work tomorrow. They constantly reflect on their decisions, analyze failures objectively, and adapt their systems. For someone who is broke, this might mean reviewing every purchase, investment, and habit quarterly, asking, did this bring me closer to financial independence or further away? Learning is not passive. It is deliberate, intentional, and iterative. Without this, even the most brilliant strategies will eventually fail, because the world moves, and those who do not adapt are left behind. In conclusion, the fourth reason people remain broke is not a single mistake but a pattern of neglecting principles, cycles, emotional mastery, and systematized learning. To escape financial stagnation, you must adopt a structured, disciplined, principle-based approach to every aspect of your money life. Leverage knowledge, track your behavior ruthlessly, understand cycles, diversify income, master patience, control your emotions, and commit to lifelong learning. Wealth is a skill, not a lucky accident, and like any skill, it requires deliberate practice, reflection, and adaptation. Break free from short-term thinking, embrace reality over illusion, and your financial life can transform dramatically. Many people think that being broke is simply a matter of not earning enough, but the reality is far more subtle. The third reason many remain financially stagnant is their inability to make decisions based on reality rather than emotion. Too often, individuals let fear, greed, or pride dictate their financial choices. This is precisely where the principles of economic and personal cycles come into play. Just like markets, personal finance operates in waves, periods of growth, stagnation, and contraction, and failing to recognize where you are in your own cycle can be disastrous. Most people chase trends, buy high, sell low, and make impulsive investments because their decisions are reactive rather than analytical. They ignore fundamental principles like cash flow management, risk assessment, and diversification. Consider the power of having a system. In my own experience building Bridgewater, I realized that the less I relied on spontaneous judgment and the more I created frameworks for decision-making, the more predictable my outcomes became. Applying this to personal finance, it means designing a plan that accounts for both opportunity and risk. For example, do not simply invest in something because everyone else is doing it. Analyze the expected outcomes, worst-case scenarios, and potential adjustments before committing. Many people fail to do this because they underestimate the consequences of small, repeated financial errors, the slow erosion of wealth. Over time, these small mistakes compound, much like interest does, but in reverse, eroding your financial foundation. Another critical aspect is acknowledging your weaknesses. If you are not naturally disciplined, you need structures that enforce discipline. Automate savings, automate investments, and set rules for expenditures. People often think self-control alone will suffice, but self-control without systems is fragile. Life is full of unforeseen pressures, emotional triggers, and market volatility. Without frameworks, you will invariably fall into the trap of reactionary behavior. Being broke is not just about the numbers, it is about your mindset and your approach to managing those numbers consistently over time. Equally important is recognizing the psychological barriers to wealth. Many people equate money with morality, security, or identity. They either fear accumulating it or feel undeserving. These subconscious beliefs influence every financial decision, often in ways that are invisible. If you do not confront these beliefs, no strategy will fully succeed. Wealth is as much about mental clarity as it is about tactical execution. You must learn to separate your ego from your financial decisions. Ask yourself, are you buying this asset because it makes sense economically, or because it makes you feel powerful? Are you avoiding an investment because of realistic risk assessment, or because of irrational fear? Learning to distinguish between emotion and logic is a cornerstone of financial growth. Finally, many remain broke because they underestimate the importance of learning and adapting continuously. The world is dynamic, interest rates change, markets shift, technologies evolve, and personal circumstances fluctuate. If your financial strategy is static, it will inevitably become obsolete. Continuous education, reading, observing, testing hypotheses, and learning from both successes and failures is not optional. It is a requirement for breaking the cycle of scarcity. People who remain broke often assume that once they learn a principle, they have mastered it. Real mastery comes from applying knowledge consistently, reviewing outcomes objectively, and adjusting systems accordingly. Most people never realize that the financial game they are playing has rules, and those rules determine who eventually wins and who stays stuck. The truth is, earning money and building wealth are two completely different activities, and confusing them leads people into the second reason they remain broke for far longer than they should. The second reason is that most people trade time for money their entire lives and never build systems that make money without them. At first, trading time for money feels normal. In fact, society is built around this exact idea. You go to school, you learn skills, you get a job, and you exchange your time and energy for a paycheck. For many people, this system works well enough to survive. It pays the bills, it provides stability, and it offers a sense of structure. But when you look at the system more closely, you begin to notice a very important limitation. Time is finite. Every person on Earth has exactly the same amount of it. 24 hours in a day. No more, no less. And when your entire financial life depends on selling hours of your time, there is a natural ceiling on how much money you can ever earn. You can work longer hours, you can work harder, you can develop more valuable skills, but eventually you will run into the same wall that everyone else runs into. There are only so many hours you can sell. This is why so many hardworking people feel like they are running on a treadmill. They work harder every year, they become more experienced, they earn slightly more money, but the fundamental structure of their financial life never changes. They are still trading time for income. And as long as that structure remains the same, their financial growth will always move slowly. The people who eventually build real wealth begin to understand this limitation earlier than others. They realize that if they want their financial life to grow, they must stop relying entirely on their own time. Instead of thinking only about how to earn more money from their labor, they begin asking a different question. How can I create something that continues generating value even when I am not directly involved? This shift in thinking is incredibly powerful because it changes the entire direction of a person's financial life. Instead of focusing only on their job, they begin focusing on systems. Systems that produce income. Systems that grow over time. Systems that can operate independently of their daily effort. A business is a system. An investment portfolio is a system. Ownership in companies is a system. Even intellectual property can become a system if it continues producing income long after it is created. Once people begin building these systems, something remarkable happens. Their income is no longer limited by the number of hours they personally work. Their money begins working as well. This idea is often described as making money work for you, but many people misunderstand what that actually means. It doesn't mean avoiding work. It doesn't mean chasing shortcuts or trying to get rich quickly. It means building structures that allow value to be created continuously. The people who eventually achieve financial independence usually spend years creating these structures. At the beginning, the results are small. The first investment might produce only a modest return. The first business might generate very little profit. The early stages can even feel discouraging because the effort appears much larger than the reward. But this is where the power of compounding begins to appear. Compounding is one of the most important forces in finance, yet most people underestimate it because its effects are slow at first. Small gains accumulate quietly in the background. Investments grow gradually. Businesses expand slowly. Systems improve step by step. Then, after enough time passes, those small gains begin to accelerate. The growth becomes visible. The financial structure becomes stronger. And eventually the systems themselves begin producing more income than the person's original job. This transition rarely happens overnight. It often takes many years of consistent effort and disciplined decision-making. But once it happens, the entire financial landscape changes. Instead of relying only on active income, the person now benefits from multiple streams of value creation. Their investments generate returns. Their ownership grows in value. Their systems continue producing income whether they are working or not. This is how many financially successful individuals gradually escape the limitations of trading time for money. They still work, often very hard, but their work is directed toward building systems rather than simply earning another paycheck. When you study economic history, you notice that this principle appears again and again. The individuals who build the largest fortunes are rarely the ones who sell the most hours of labor. They are the ones who build the most effective systems of ownership. They create organizations, investments, and structures that continue operating long after the initial effort is complete. And once those systems begin working, they create opportunities that simply don't exist for people whose entire income depends on their time. This doesn't mean that jobs are useless or that everyone should immediately abandon traditional careers. In fact, many people begin building wealth while still working normal jobs. The key difference is what they do with the income they earn. Some people spend it entirely on lifestyle. Others use part of it to slowly build systems that eventually reduce their dependence on that same job. Over time, that difference becomes enormous. One path leads to permanent dependence on income. The other leads toward ownership and long-term wealth creation. And this is the second major reason so many people remain broke. Not because they lack ambition or discipline, but because their entire financial structure is built around selling time instead of building systems. Most people believe they are broke because they simply don't work hard enough. That is the story society repeats over and over again. Work harder. Sleep less. Hustle more. Sacrifice your time now, and someday you'll finally become financially free. But if that idea were actually true, the hardest working people in the world would also be the richest people in the world. And that clearly isn't the case. All around the world there are millions of people waking up early every single day, working long exhausting hours, and yet their financial situation barely changes. Their income might increase slightly over time, but real wealth never appears. Years pass, decades pass, and they remain in the same financial position they started in. So the real question isn't why people don't work hard enough. The real question is why some people escape the financial system while others remain trapped inside it for their entire lives. When you study economies long enough, you begin to see patterns. Money moves through the world in predictable ways. Human behavior around money is also surprisingly predictable. People make similar decisions, follow similar habits, and repeat the same financial mistakes generation after generation. And when you look closely at people who stay broke, you start to notice something important. It's not that they are lazy. It's not that they are incapable. Most of the time, they simply misunderstand how the financial system actually works. And when you misunderstand the system, you end up playing a game that was never designed for you to win. Over decades of studying markets, economies, and human psychology, one thing becomes very clear: people who struggle financially often fall into the same three traps. Three ways of thinking that quietly shape their financial lives. Three beliefs that seem harmless at first but slowly prevent them from ever building real wealth. And the first reason most people stay broke is something almost everyone believes when they are young. It's the belief that income creates wealth. At first glance, this idea sounds completely logical. If you earn more money, your life should improve. If your salary increases, your financial problems should slowly disappear. And in the short term, that might even seem true. When people start earning more money, they feel more comfortable. They upgrade their lifestyle. They move to a better apartment. They buy a nicer car. They travel more often. They spend more freely because they finally feel like they've made progress. But something strange tends to happen at the exact same time their income rises. Their expenses rise too. Sometimes at exactly the same speed. Sometimes even faster. This phenomenon is incredibly common, and it has a name. It's called lifestyle inflation. As people earn more, they adjust their expectations of what life should look like. The things that once felt like luxuries slowly become necessities. A bigger home, a better phone, more expensive habits, more expensive surroundings. And before long, the extra income that once felt like freedom becomes something else entirely. It becomes another level of financial pressure. Now imagine two people starting at the same point in life. Both begin their careers earning a modest salary. Over time, both of them start earning more. The first person treats every raise as permission to upgrade their lifestyle. A slightly bigger apartment. A slightly better car. A slightly more expensive life. Nothing extreme. Just small upgrades every year. From the outside, everything looks like progress. But behind the scenes, something important is happening. Their financial life is becoming completely dependent on their income continuing to grow. If the income stops, the entire structure collapses. The second person approaches money differently. Instead of upgrading their life every time they earn more, they start directing a portion of that income somewhere else. Into investments. Into ownership. Into things that can grow independently of their time. Maybe it starts small. A small investment account. A stake in a business. Ownership of assets that slowly increase in value. At first, the difference between these two people is almost invisible. They might live in similar neighborhoods, drive similar cars, and earn similar salaries. But over time, something powerful begins to happen. One person remains dependent on their job. The other slowly builds systems that generate wealth beyond their job. And that difference compounds year after year. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings about money that exists in modern society. People believe income is the goal. They believe the key to financial success is simply earning more. But income alone rarely creates wealth. In fact, many high-income earners remain financially fragile their entire lives. Their lifestyle grows as fast as their salary, and the moment that salary disappears, so does their sense of financial security. Real wealth comes from something else entirely. It comes from ownership. Ownership of businesses. Ownership of investments. Ownership of assets that continue working long after you stop working. When you study the wealthiest individuals in the world, you notice something interesting. Very little of their wealth comes from salaries. Their money comes from equity, from assets, from things they own that continue growing over time. This is how financial systems actually work. Money flows toward ownership, toward assets, toward things that compound. But most people spend their entire lives focusing only on income, never realizing that the real game is being played somewhere else. And that misunderstanding alone keeps millions of people trapped in the exact same financial position year after year. Even as they work harder, earn more, and push themselves further than they ever expected. And this is the first real reason many people remain broke far longer than they should. Not because they don't earn enough money, but because they misunderstand the difference between earning money and building wealth.